Alright, Travis Wayne Goodsill, back from my run. Today, the FBI will resume their desk jobs, and we'll see if they're also protecting the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or if they'll finally do their jobs. That was the little test, is that I reported on the Utah FBI as being complicit with the church's crimes. So we'll find out. If they ignore me, then they chose to pass it on to the Utah office, or just outright ignore it. Because if they take it seriously, then they should act, because it's a national security threat. We have a whole state that is compromised in opposition to the United States. We have over 2,000 former federal prosecutors who have now signed the petition to have Barr removed, and judges are meeting today to talk about their feelings. Nothing's getting done. Nothing's actually pursuing justice. People are just giving a form of doing something, and in the end they do nothing and end up supporting and defending a monarchy, the coup d'etat of America. So anyway, now that I've scared off a majority of you, I'm going to talk about the scientific keys of the priesthood. We have so far de-evolved from the ancient religion that the knowledge of the different offices of the religion, ancient religion, is gone, and they replaced it through this de-evolution process with superstition, idolatry, and fear tactics with the positions of titles. And so nobody understands that the ancient Egyptians, for example, were scientists. We'll start with prophet rather than the lower ones. A prophet, when you read in Samuel or 2 Kings or 1 Kings, when Samuel is given to the temple into the care of Eli, they make a reference to him being a prophet, which they then clarify by the redactor of the text, that before prophets were the title, seers were the title. So when we look at any prophet given to anybody previous to that, we need to understand that they're actually supposed to be called seers. But a prophet is one who predicts specifically about the future. Prophets are not known too much for their past predictions or their current predictions. They most often warn of future danger. And so Amos 3:7 talks about prophets giving warnings. And they also use the Aten rather than the prophet. You have to go back to your Hebrew text and see that it's Adonai, which is Aten. which was the Egyptian Melchizedek under Akhenaten. The seer, the head of the prophets. So a seer is perfectly defined in the Book of Mormon, where it talks about Ammon and talking to the Lamanite king, and says he can know of things past, present, and future. So as we often think of prophets as just seeing the future, the original position was somebody who can make predictions about the past, the present, and the future. And so what field of science? What field of science makes predictions about the past? Archaeologists and anthropologists. Duh. And so that's part of their assignment is to learn archaeology and anthropology. The current, you just have to be a news reporter, reporting the news. And so they're news investigative journalists. And then for future events, that's just a regular scientist. All fields have to make predictions on what's going to happen next as a consequence if something is done currently. And in certain situations where you need to be aware of upcoming dangers by certain acts, you need to know the consequences of actions. So that's just a regular scientist. So for climate change, for example, you have to know whether or not the rising temperature of the Earth is going to have a negative effect on the Earth or biological life forms. You need to be able to make the prediction, and so many people have already done that and have been sounding the warning alarms as our government has been shutting them down and silencing them with mockery and physical obstruction. So that's the main one. I got that one out of the way now. A priest. Priests are known for working in the temple. They're not the high priests, though. There's a difference. The high priests are often the ones who are handling the offerings that are given to the temple. And back then, it wasn't money. It was food and drink offerings. And so, chefs, culinary scientists, and that's what the high priests were. The high priests, however, are different in that they're doctors. They're healers. And so Jesus, for example, goes around healing people. He's a doctor. That's a high priest. Because if you're familiar of high priests giving blessings, they're not just putting hands on head, saying words that's all are just nonsense. No, they're getting revelation as to how to heal the person. They're not just doing some magic trick. For example, in my first marriage, Melissa was just a few months old. We moved back so that I can finish at Rick's, and Stephanie was all concerned that Melissa was not swallowing the milk she was giving her. She was trying to wean her off of breast milk and was giving her milk, and Melissa was spitting it up. So Stephanie was concerned, and she asked me, as the priesthood leader in the home, what to do. And thought came to my mind: have you tried, scientific experiment, have you tried a skim milk or 1%, 2%, because she said she was using whole milk. And she said, well, no. And so she ran the experiment that I suggested to her and got some skim milk, and sure enough, Melissa was able to swallow it. And it's just simple things like that. But they're scientific medical doctors who are capable of healing people. So not complicated, not magical, mystical, hocus pocus, abracadabra stuff. It's just science. And so if you women are concerned about your low stature not presiding over the family, think again. Think of all the science that you perform for your children. So women have a higher stature than men have led them to believe they have. And so then we get to Revelator. If you're wondering about elders, the Mormon Church has lessened the status of elders. Elders were the tribal old people. So the family leadership of the various tribes were elders, and they were more of a governing body rather than a religious body. And so I don't factor them into this situation as scientists. Revelators, those were ones who were astronomers, not astrologers. There is a big definitional difference between an astrologer and an astronomer. Even astronomers will tell you boldly, we are not astrologers. Don't come to us for predictions about your life and what you should do as to whether to marry somebody or invest some money. That's all the astrology is nonsense. Don't fall for those scams. Astronomy is different. Astronomy is the science where you recognize the patterns of the movements of the celestial bodies, and you're able to make predictions about the past, the present, and the future based on the observations you make. And so, in a sense, they are specified seers for celestial signs. The ancients also were able to recognize patterns on Earth connected with the movements, and that's where astrology got confused and de-evolved from astronomy. But they knew things. They knew not only when certain events would occur, like a total solar eclipse, they knew where on Earth it was going to occur. And so when you have the biblical prophecies of the last days, they're giving specific dates. And I've gone over that. They're now. They've already happened. And so we're in the last days, as prophesied millennia ago. Before Joel. Long before Jesus, because Joel was before Jesus and John. And so these guys knew that America would be the land, not Jerusalem, as all evangelicals are pushing Trump to destroy so that Jesus will come. They got all messed up by Christianity with their literal interpretation of the Bible. You got to be scientists, guys, and that's where we get to the last one, the last scientific field, translator. When you don't know translation, you screw up the Bible, and that's what's been done. The Bible has been poorly translated multiple times, and things have been left out because they didn't know how it fit their interpretation or their translation, and or their beliefs. And so the source origin is not understood. As I've told you, it's the Egyptians, their documents, except for the Book of Esther. Sorry, the Book of Esther is a Mesopotamian document. Ishtar, the goddess Ishtar, and Mordecai, he's the god Marduk. That's how they did it anciently, and people recognized it with Ishtar and Marduk with the Book of Esther, but they didn't apply it for the rest of the Bible to the Egyptians. And so that was a big giveaway as to how to find the source origin for the Bible stories and books, even the gospel stories. And everybody messed up because they aren't translators. They may know a language, but they aren't translators. And that's a specific scientific field as well. Alrighty. That's pretty much it. You've got to have somebody who leads congregations, which has become bishops, pastors. They're compared to shepherds because they control the flock, the congregation. Congregation gathers as a type and symbol of the brutal murder of God, who was Osiris in the Egyptian religion, whose body was hacked up into 14 pieces originally, and then it became 42 and whatever for the nomes of Egypt, the districts. But originally it was 14, and that's why the congregation are living in their separate homes, and they gather to the temple or a chapel now to partake of the broken bread, where the broken bread is disseminated to the congregation who has gathered from the four corners of the world. That's where you get your pilgrimages to holy sites, and that's just a remembrance of that, partaking of the literal broken body of Osiris in remembrance of his murder and the usurpation of his kingdom by his brother, needing to have his son restore the throne. So it's all based on the latter-day apocalypse. So there you go. It's all science. Nothing complicated, nothing tricky, nothing magical, nothing mystical, nothing supernatural. You're not supposed to be giving rote prayers. You're not supposed to give seances. You're not just saying your own will. Oh, please, Grandma, don't die. That's not what it's all about. It's all science. And if we could have our scientists be actual scientists and not pursue the current path that we're on, where they are subject to pharmaceutical companies, government regulations, insurance regulations, and all sorts of other crap. So, alrighty.